It's a pleasure to be with you here in Istanbul and to share a little bit of gastrophysics, the new science of eating and of dining. This is the title of my 2017 book, which is really an attempt to move beyond molecular gastronomy, modernist cuisine, which has given us 3 decades of science in the kitchen, and instead to think about the science of the dining room, the science of the people who eat the food that we prepare and serve. I come to you not as a chef, but as a psychologist interested in the senses. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to optimize food and beverage multisensory experience design by thinking about what's going on in the head of the diner. And really, one might ask, why do we need gastrophysics? Why do we need a new science linked to food? Don't we already have great chefs and great food provision? Well, I think the reason is partly shown by this slide here, an example of some Asian diners who are clearly not enjoying whatever it is that's been smeared on that slice of bread. They are, in fact, pulling what is known as the Marmite face. They see this piece of bread, it looks brown, it looks sweet and sticky, it looks like Nutella, but in fact it is Marmite. They were expecting, from what they saw, to taste something sweet and chocolatey. Instead, they tasted something savory and umami-rich. And this disconfirmation of expectation is something our brains do not like. It is negatively valenced, and that is certainly not what you want your guests, who will be eating the food that you prepare, to be experiencing. And it was precisely this face, this disconfirmation of expectation, that the diners in the world's top restaurant, the Fat Duck in Bray, near Oxford where I work, under the management of chef Heston Blumenthal, his diners in his restaurant pulled the Marmite face when he introduced this dish onto the menu. And as soon as you see this plate of food, your brain, within 100th of a second, is predicting what it is. Is it energy dense? Would you like to eat it? Do you love the taste of it? And for most of us, when we see a pink ice cream, we're thinking that must be raspberry ice cream, strawberry ice cream, sweet, perhaps unhealthy. I like it, but I'd have to go through the gym. All of those thoughts go through all of our minds within the blink of an eye, because our brains have evolved to pay attention to energy-dense foods. Unfortunately, this dish that the world's top chef thought was perfectly seasoned is not raspberry ice cream, as the diners' eyes led them to believe. It is in fact a historic savory ice cream, either frozen crab bisque or smoked salmon ice cream. The color is perfect, the color is entirely natural, it's just not what diners expected. And it was this dish, served in the world's top restaurant, that led to the world's top chef, Heston Blumenthal, to realize it's not just about seasoning your ingredients and your dishes. You need to know what's going on in the mind of the diner. Because the pleasures of the table, of any dining table or bar, reside primarily in the mind, not in the mouth. Because it's in our mind where the sight of food, the sound of crunch and crispy and crackly, the texture, the aroma, the taste, your mood, the context, the music in the background, all of that comes together for the first time in your brain. And then our brains play this wonderful trick convincing us we're tasting what we think we're tasting in our mouth. The solution in this case, one of the early examples of gastrophysics, the psychology of food, of the diner, was to realize that if you do not know the name of this dish, your brain thinks savory. You do not like the dish then, you do not like the dish thereafter. But if you call this a historic savory ice, if you name the dish appropriately, then suddenly diners know what to expect, they enjoy it then, and they're more likely to eat it thereafter. And we work a lot, hence the gastronomy of gastrophysics, we work a lot with chefs around the world, but sometimes that can seem a bit elitist, a bit esoteric, and most certainly expensive. Many of these restaurants, most of us could not afford to go to. So we might think, who cares what happens in the world's top restaurant and the problems they face? It doesn't apply to me. But I think that's not the right take-home message here. Because I think some of the best stuff that happens in the Formula One of the kitchen in the 3 Michelin star restaurants, in the world-leading restaurants, world top 50, does percolate down to the high street, to the local restaurant, within a year or two. My favorite example of this, about the power of naming to change what your guests think about the food you serve, comes from this monster of the deep, Patagonian toothfish. Looks pretty ugly, doesn't sound very nice. It's been on restaurant menus around the world for decades. But when consumers read that name, Patagonian toothfish, they think, nah, it's sustainable, it's healthy, it's nutritious, it's tasty. Chefs, I know, love to cook with it, but diners don't order it. I'll have the steak or something else instead. Until one changes the name into Chilean sea bass, and suddenly documented sales of this healthy, nutritious, sustainable seafood rise 1,200% of actual restaurant sales in the UK, in Australia, North America, and beyond. So if we're trying to change the way people think about the food we serve, nudge them towards more sustainable and healthy food options, then we cannot ignore the power of naming to transform the experience and the desires of our consumers. So it's not about the ingredients per se, it's about what's happening in the mind of that person thinking about ordering the food that you have prepared. Now, a key part of our research is to think about the context, the multi-sensory environment in which we eat and drink. And most of us think that we can really just taste the drink in the glass, the food on the plate. Most of us think we would not be influenced by the color of the plate, by the softness of the chair, by the music in the background. We can really taste what we're being given. At the same time, everyone seems to have a version of this, what's called the Provençal rosé paradox. The experience for many Northern Europeans that when they go to the south of France for their summer holidays, the rosé wine tastes delicious. So cheap, so tasty, such a wonderful experience that we're tempted to buy a bottle or a case, bring it back to England or somewhere else, and then serve it to our friends on a cold, rainy night. But it doesn't taste the same. Something has changed. It's disappointing. It doesn't taste the same as it did on the shores of the Mediterranean. Did it not travel well? Was the bottle shaken up in the air? I think the bottle and the wine are the same. What changes is our mood and the context we're in. And that while we cannot literally taste the sun beating down on our back, the smell of the salty sea air, or the sound of the seagulls, nevertheless, those contextual cues influence our experience of food and drink. Not only that, if we're on holiday, we're probably in a better mood. We might be celebrating with our family, relaxed, not at work. And whenever we're in a better mood, food also tastes better. So this is the Provençal rosé paradox, and we've been working to try and capture that Provençal rosé moment with chefs around the world in their restaurants, no matter how far from the sea they might be. I suppose the Turkish equivalent might be the Turkish raki paradox, I don't know. Sure, it tastes very nice here, but probably not quite the same to many diners elsewhere. But if we could be in control of the atmosphere, perhaps we could nudge them towards ordering more Turkish drinks abroad to capture that experience that they had here on their holidays. And this is the way it plays out. This is the world's top restaurant, the Fat Duck in Bray. Chef Heston Blumenthal and myself. And diners in the restaurant are given a plate of sashimi, seaweed, sand and foam, looking like the seashore. You can see it there. There's also a conch shell out of which come some earbuds. And diners in the world's top restaurant are invited to put the earbuds in, and they will hear the sounds of the sea, the seagulls overhead, a little bit quieter than we heard here. And the experience is transformative. It's just seafood. Slough, where the Fat Duck is based, is as far from the sea as you get in England. But nevertheless, this dish brings many diners to tears. And you might ask, how often do you cry over seafood? I don't very often. But many journalists and just regular diners cry over this dish. Something about bringing technology to the dining table transforms what is already a great experience by capturing that Provençal rosé moment, studied through gastrophysics and incorporated into a great chef's dish. And versions of the sound of the sea dish now can be found in Marrakesh restaurants, in Shanghai, and elsewhere around the world. The first example of bringing technology to the dining table, not to distract the diner, but to enhance a great food offering by being in control of everything else, the total multi-sensory experience. We can take that further with sounds like this. This is what's called sonic seasoning. And this is from a Shanghai cafe. We do lots of research to show that certain sounds can make food taste sweeter. Certain sounds can bring out bitterness. The lower the pitch of the sound, the more bitter your chocolate, your coffee will be. Play tinkling high-pitched sounds like you just heard, and that will bring out the sweetness of your baklava and whatever else you might be fond of. We can add 10% sweetness to a dish simply by sonically seasoning it. Using music, much as you might use a salt or a pepper shaker. And this was used in the cafe in Beijing so that they could reduce the sugar content in their cakes and pastries, give a healthier food offering, but keep the perceived sweetness just as strong as ever. And this notion of sonic sweetness is now again being found across the world and is a very popular sensory marketing opportunity for many food and drinks brands. I suppose I should just mention briefly also here, thinking in terms of the gastroeconomics, then these sort of notions that I guess will pop up throughout the day of both gastro-diplomacy, how a nation's food fits into its external image, a topic that has a long history, from John Gummer here, a famous British politician, forcing his daughter to eat a burger in the middle of the BSE crisis in England. Probably not a good marketing move. Or F.T. Marinetti on the right, one of the first Italian futurists with his futurist cookbook, agitating against pasta in Italy because it made the populace and the soldiers slow of thought. This is an important area, and together with gastrodiplomacy on the one hand and gastro-tourism on the other, I think there's an exciting area for gastrophysics to play its part. And so, for example, last November, I was working with Chef Joseph Youssef from Kitchen Theory in London, an Anglo-Egyptian chef, on a gastro-tourism event in Riyadh, the Al Maida multisensory dining experience. Because 26% of all Brits, and I guess those of other countries, choose their holiday destination today based on the food that they expect to eat at that location. But if a country like Saudi Arabia doesn't really have a very clear food culture to begin with, then what are the tourists to Saudi Arabia of tomorrow looking forward to? It's hard to say, but hopefully with this multisensory, immersive dining experience, and by training up the next generation of young Saudi chefs with modernist techniques, there's an opportunity to incorporate cuisine into the gastro-tourism of the Saudi economy in the years ahead. So there's a few other things to think about. One is the way we plate, and this comes from work with Ferran Adria, another of the world's top chefs who we worked with in 2012, serving what looks like strawberry ice cream. In this case, it really is. But we served it off a black plate or a white plate. People were asked how sweet, how flavorful, how much they enjoyed the ice cream. Same people eating the same food on the same day in the same place, but what they said about the food changed depending whether they ate from a white plate or a black plate. The white plate made that dessert 11% sweeter to the diners in the Alicia Foundation in Spain. That was 2012, we published it. Seems strange, you cannot literally taste a plate, but the color, the shape, the texture of the plates on which you serve food can systematically and predictably change the experience of your guests. And while that insight may not be of great relevance to the world's top chef, for a once-in-a-lifetime culinary experience, if you're selling 1 million yogurts a day in the supermarket, one might want to think more carefully about the shape and the color of the yogurt pot or the packaging in which consumer food products are experienced. This has been followed up more recently by Turkish research. I will not try and pronounce the name of the authors because I get my Turkish all completely wrong, but nevertheless they were able to show in a month-long study that by systematically choosing the plate and tray color here in Turkey, they could affect the absolute amount of food consumed. Again, a possibly healthy way to nudge people towards more sustainable and healthy food choices. For ourselves, we worked with Neff Kitchens and a British designer to create these plates, which are, I think, the world's first gastrophysics plateware range. Plates whose shape, whose color, whose texture are specifically designed to enhance the sweetness in the pink round bowl at the top, to bring out the fishy flavors with the blue and white plate on the right, and to enhance the texture and the mouthfeel of ginger and galangal in a Thai green curry in the bottom left. A very rough-feeling dish. And this, for me, I think, is part of the future of our food experience. Not just thinking about the food we serve, but the plate on which it's presented and the environment in which that food is consumed. And beyond real plates, we might also start to see how digital technologies can play in here. Be it dining off tablets, where could that take us in terms of enhancing our guests' experience, or using augmented reality when we've fished our seas to extinction of our favorite sushi fish, we may put on a headset and virtually render it for the diners of tomorrow. Sad, but a potential possibility. So just to finish up here, I want to think about AI and robots in kitchens and dining in the future. Both are the very exciting area opening up currently around AI generation of food imagery. When you're advertising your resort, the dishes served in your restaurants to consumers, do you actually plate the food up and take a picture of it? Or do you use AI in order to generate hyper-delicious food images? And if you do that, can your guests or consumers tell the difference between a real and an AI food image? And this is research we just published in the UK. You can see 2 carrot cakes on the screen here. One is a real carrot cake. The other is an AI-generated image using DALL-E. In fact, it's the plate on the left is the AI-generated image. You can sort of tell because the lighting looks especially good. That tends to be a key. But what we find is that consumers normally cannot tell the difference between AI-generated and real food imagery. But if you tell them that AI was involved, if you tell them that a robot was involved in the preparation of the food, then they like that food offering less. And hence there's some real challenges here, thinking about how technology, both augmented reality, artificial intelligence, will feed in, as it were, to our food experiences in the years ahead. And with that, I will thank you for your attention and happy to take questions outside throughout the day.